Welcome, dear viewers, to a spine-tingling journey through the unknown, where the open road becomes a realm of chilling tales and eerie encounters. In this video, we present 3 bone-chilling horror stories that will make you think twice before embarking on your next road trip. From desolate highways to remote countryside, these stories will have you questioning the safety of the road less traveled. So fasten your seatbelts, keep your headlights on, and prepare for a hair-raising ride as we delve into these terrifying road trip nightmares. Whether you're a thrill seeker or just love a good scare, these stories will leave you haunted by the dark side of the open road. The haunting road trip to Ashenbrook. I had always been an adventurous soul, craving excitement and thrill in my life. So when my friends proposed a road trip to the remote countryside, I eagerly agreed. Little did I know that this trip would turn into a nightmare that still haunts me to this day. It all began on a crisp autumn morning when the 5 of us gathered at my friend Mark's house. Mark was the driving force behind this adventure, always seeking out the unknown. We piled into his beat-up old van, excitedly discussing our plans for the trip. The air was filled with anticipation as we set off on the open road. Our first destination was a remote, abandoned town named Ashenbrook. Legends surrounded the town, tales of eerie occurrences and a haunted past. We were drawn to it like moths to a flame, our curiosity overpowering any reservations we may have had. As we approached Ashenbrook, the atmosphere changed. The once vibrant autumn leaves seemed to lose their colour, and the air grew thick with an eerie stillness. The town itself was like something out of a nightmare. Dilapidated buildings stood like silent sentinels, their windows shattered and their walls covered in graffiti. We parked the van on the outskirts of town and began to explore on foot. The town was in a state of disarray, but what struck me the most was the utter silence. Not even the wind whispered through the desolate streets. Our footsteps echoed ominously, and I could feel the unease growing within me. It was as if the town itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. We ventured deeper into Ashenbrook, drawn towards a particularly eerie-looking building, an old, decrepit mansion that seemed to be the epicenter of the town's haunting reputation. As we entered, a chilling breeze swept through the hallway, causing the candles lining the walls to flicker and die. Goosebumps covered my arms, and I felt a growing sense of dread. The interior of the mansion was a maze of decaying furniture and faded wallpaper. It was as if time had frozen, preserving the mansion in a state of perpetual decay. We explored room after room, each one seemingly more unsettling than the last. In one room, we discovered a dusty old diary on a weathered desk. As I opened the diary, its brittle pages crumbled beneath my touch, revealing the handwritten logs of a family that had once lived in the mansion. The entries chronicled their descent into madness as they were tormented by supernatural forces. The last entry was particularly disturbing. October 23rd, 1897. The shadows have grown more sinister, and the whispers in the walls have turned into anguished cries. I fear we are no longer alone in this wretched house. Our youngest daughter, Emily, has vanished without a trace. We have searched every corner of this accursed mansion, but she is nowhere to be found. We are trapped in a nightmare from which there is no escape. I shuddered as I read those words, feeling the weight of the past pressing down on me. It seemed that the horrors of Ashenbrook had been tormenting its inhabitants for generations. With each passing moment, the mansion seemed to come alive with malevolent energy. Shadows danced in the corners of our vision, and whispers filled the air, unintelligible yet unsettling. It was clear that we were not alone in that accursed place. Desperation took hold of us as we searched for a way out, but the mansion seemed to have no end. The walls seemed to close in on us, and the once grand rooms turned into a claustrophobic nightmare. Panic set in, and we became separated, each of us wandering through the labyrinthine mansion alone. I found myself in a dimly lit room, its walls covered in faded family portraits. The eyes of the people in the paintings seemed to follow my every move. I stumbled upon an old diary on a dusty desk, and as I opened it, the room grew colder, and the air seemed to thicken. The diary contained disturbing accounts of a family that had lived in the mansion centuries ago. They had been plagued by unexplainable phenomena, and their lives had ended in tragedy and madness. As I read the last entry, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the mansion. It was Mark's voice, filled with terror and despair. I dropped the diary and rushed through the winding corridors, desperately searching for my friends. But the mansion had other plans for us. One by one, my friends vanished, their screams echoing through the mansion's endless halls, until I was the last one left. I stumbled into a room that seemed to defy the laws of physics, its dimensions warping and shifting before my eyes. In the center of the room, I saw a grotesque figure, a shadowy presence that seemed to feed on my fear. I tried to flee, but the room's walls closed in, trapping me in its nightmarish grasp. The figure approached, its cold skeletal hand reaching for me. I screamed, and then darkness enveloped me. When I awoke, I found myself lying on the outskirts of Ashenbrook, the morning sun just beginning to rise. The van was parked nearby, and my friends were nowhere to be found. I stumbled back to the van, my mind filled with confusion and terror. To this day, I don't know what happened in that mansion or where my friends went. All I know is that I narrowly escaped with my life, and the horrors of that road trip still haunt my dreams. Ashenbrook remains a place of dread in my memory, a reminder that some roads should never be travelled and some mysteries should never be unravelled. Stalked on the endless road. The desolate countryside stretched endlessly before me as I drove along the lonely, winding road. I had always enjoyed the solitude of solo road trips, the freedom to go wherever the wind took me. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting eerie shadows across the landscape, a sense of unease crept over me. The vast emptiness that surrounded me felt suffocating, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. My unease turned into outright fear when I heard a loud pop and felt the car shudder beneath me. My heart raced as I realized I had a flat tire, and I pulled over to the side of the road. I cursed my bad luck as I inspected the damage, knowing I was in the middle of nowhere with no cell service and no spare tire. I was just beginning to panic when I heard a soft voice behind me. "Need some help?" I spun around to see a woman standing a few feet away. She was dressed in a long, flowing dress that seemed out of place in the desolate landscape. Her dark hair cascaded down her shoulders, and her eyes glimmered with an unsettling intensity. Relief washed over me as I saw her. "Oh, thank goodness you're here," I said, grateful for the chance of assistance. "My tire is flat and I don't have a spare. Do you have one I could borrow?" She smiled warmly. "Of course I do. I just happen to have a spare tire in my car. I'll be happy to help you." I felt a sense of gratitude towards this stranger who had appeared seemingly out of nowhere to save me from my predicament. As she opened the trunk of her car and retrieved the spare tire, I couldn't help but wonder how lucky I was to have encountered her. She worked quickly and efficiently, changing my flat tire with ease. I offered her my heartfelt thanks as I stood by, feeling a bit helpless. Once the tire was replaced, she turned to me and said, "I hope you have a safe journey from here on. Take care of yourself." As I got back into my car, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Something about the situation just didn't sit right with me. But I pushed those thoughts aside, attributing my discomfort to the eerie surroundings and the late hour. I continued my journey, but as I drove, my phone buzzed with a message. I glanced down and saw a text from an unknown number. It read, "Glad I could help. Drive safely." I frowned, wondering how the mysterious woman had gotten my number. Perhaps she had asked for it while helping me with the tire. I replied with a quick thank you and continued driving, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched. As I drove further into the night, my unease grew. I couldn't help but glance in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see the woman's car following me. The text messages continued, each one more unsettling than the last. "Are you alone out here? Where are you headed? Let's keep each other company." I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the messages. Who was this woman, and why was she so interested in my journey? I considered pulling over and calling the police, but with horrible cell service, I was completely cut off from help. As I continued to drive, I realized that the woman was no longer behind me. I felt a sense of relief, thinking I had finally lost her. But then, just as suddenly as she had appeared earlier, she was back, her car pulling up alongside mine. She rolled down her window and smiled at me. I thought we could keep each other company. It's a long, lonely road out here. I felt a sense of dread as I looked at her. There was something off about her smile, something that sent shivers down my spine. I knew I needed to get away from her, but there was no one around to help me, and I had no way of contacting anyone. I tried to keep my composure as I replied, "I appreciate your offer, but I'd rather continue on my own." Her smile faded, replaced by a look of anger. "You're being rude. I went out of my way to help you, and this is how you repay me." I felt a surge of panic as she continued to drive alongside me, refusing to leave me alone. The text messages on my phone continued, each one more threatening than the last. "You can't escape me. I know where you are. I'll make sure you never leave this road." Tears filled my eyes as I realized the danger I was in. I had no choice but to try and outsmart this woman and find a way to escape her clutches. I swerved off the road onto a narrow dirt path, hoping that my smaller car would be able to navigate it better than hers. As I sped down the winding path, I saw her car fall behind, unable to keep up with me. But just when I thought I had escaped, I heard a loud crash from behind me. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw her car had collided with a tree. Smoke billowed from the wreckage, and I knew I had to act quickly. I continued down the path, my heart racing, and eventually I found my way back to the main road. I drove as fast as I could, praying that I had finally escaped the clutches of the mysterious woman. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, I pulled into a gas station and called the police. I told them everything that had happened, and they assured me they would investigate. Now, to this day, I don't know who that woman was or why she targeted me. But I learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of the open road and the nightmares that can lurk in the most unexpected places. Whispers in the haunted mansion. The day had been perfect, filled with laughter and adventure as my friends and I embarked on a road trip through the countryside. But as the sun dipped below the horizon and the fog began to roll in, our carefree journey took a dark and ominous turn. "We should have stopped for directions," Sarah grumbled from the passenger seat, peering out at the thickening fog that seemed to swallow the road ahead. "We don't need directions, we have GPS," Mark replied confidently from the driver's seat, his fingers tapping away at the dashboard screen. But despite Mark's assurances, the GPS led us deeper into the dense fog, and before we knew it, we were completely disoriented. The road ahead disappeared into a wall of white, and the only sound was the low hum of the engine. "Okay, maybe we should have stopped for directions," Mark admitted, his voice tinged with frustration. As the fog grew thicker, we could barely see more than a few feet ahead. Panic began to set in, and I could feel the tension in the car rising. "Does anyone else feel like we're being watched?" whispered Chris, who was sitting in the back seat. "Cut it out, Chris," Sarah chided, but I couldn't help but share his unease. The fog was oppressive, and the feeling of isolation weighed heavily on us. Just as we were about to give up hope, we saw a faint glimmer of light through the fog. Mark steered towards it, and as we got closer, we saw the outline of a massive, dilapidated mansion rising out of the mist. "Look, a house," I exclaimed, my relief palpable. "Maybe they can help us get back on track." Mark parked the car in front of the mansion, and we piled out, our breath visible in the chilly air. The mansion loomed above us, its windows shattered and its walls covered in ivy. It was a hauntingly beautiful sight, but there was something eerie about it that sent shivers down my spine. We approached the front door, and Sarah gave it a tentative knock. The sound echoed through the empty halls, and we waited in silence, hoping for a response. After what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open, revealing a tall, gaunt man with hollow eyes. His clothes were tattered, and he looked as though he hadn't seen the light of day in years. "Can we use your phone?" Mark asked, his voice shaking slightly. The man's eyes flicked over us, his expression unreadable. Finally, he stepped aside and gestured for us to enter. "You may come in, but I cannot guarantee your safety." We exchanged nervous glances but stepped inside the mansion. The interior was just as grand as the exterior, but it was clear that the house had seen better days. Dust covered every surface and cobwebs hung in the corners of the rooms. The man led us into a sitting room with a grand fireplace. He offered us a seat and disappeared into the shadows, returning moments later with a tray of tea. "Thank you," Sarah said, taking a cup from the tray. "We really appreciate your hospitality." The man nodded, his eyes never leaving us. "You are welcome here for now, but you must leave before nightfall." "Why?" Chris asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. The man's lips twisted into a grim smile. "There are things that go bump in the night in this house. You would do well to heed my warning." We exchanged uneasy glances but didn't press the issue. We were grateful for his help and didn't want to overstay our welcome. As the evening wore on, we shared stories and laughter, trying to forget the unease that still lingered in the back of our minds. But as the shadows grew longer and the mansion's ancient timbers creaked ominously, our unease returned. "I can't take this anymore," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "We need to leave now." Mark nodded in agreement. "I'll go ask the man for directions and we'll be on our way." But when Mark went to find the man, he was nowhere to be found. The mansion seemed to have swallowed him whole. Panic set in as we realized we were trapped in the mansion, with no way out and no way to contact the outside world. The fog outside had grown even thicker, obscuring the windows completely. "We need to stick together," I said, my voice shaky. "We'll find a way out of here." As we explored the mansion, we discovered room after room, each one more unsettling than the last. Some were filled with antique furniture covered in dusty sheets, while others were empty, with nothing but cracked wallpaper and faded portraits. And then, as we turned a corner, we found a room that made our blood run cold. It was a makeshift bedroom, with a dusty old crib in the centre. The walls were covered in scribbles and drawings, and the floor was strewn with children's toys. "What is this place?" Chris whispered, his voice trembling. But before we could answer, we heard a soft, eerie lullaby coming from the crib. We approached cautiously, our hearts pounding in our chests. And then from the shadows, a figure emerged. It was the gaunt man we had met earlier, but he was no longer alone. He cradled a doll in his arms, and behind him, a group of ghostly children appeared, their eyes empty and hollow. The man's voice was a sinister whisper as he sang the lullaby, and we realized with horror that the children were not children at all, but malevolent spirits. "We're trapped," Mark said, his voice filled with dread. The man's eyes bore into us as he sang, and we knew we were in grave danger. Our only hope was to find a way out of the mansion before the spirits claimed us as their own. But as we ran through the labyrinthine halls, the mansion seemed to shift and change around us, leading us deeper into its dark depths. The ghostly children pursued us relentlessly, their laughter echoing in our ears. And then, just as we were about to give in to despair, we stumbled upon a room with a dusty old mirror. I had an idea. "Quick, everyone, touch the mirror!" I shouted. We pressed our hands against the glass, and with a blinding flash of light, we were transported back to the foggy countryside, the mansion disappearing behind us. We were shaken but alive, grateful to have escaped the horrors of that haunted place. As we drove away, the fog began to lift, and the world outside felt strangely normal once again. But we couldn't shake the feeling that the mansion still haunted our dreams, a horrifying secret that would continue to test our friendship and haunt us forever. Thanks for watching. To support us, please like and subscribe.